So it's after 7 o'clock. We'll start tonight's webinar as part of the conservation webinar series, the BC Wildlife Federation. This is our first one, I believe, for 2023. We'll be doing these monthly. The next one is March on the Southern BC Cougar Project with Siobhan Darlington from UBC Okanagan. We've been doing these since, I believe, the fall of 2020. Really, the intent here is to help, translate science into information for all of our members of the public, and elected officials, and folks in the media who want to attend our stuff. So thank you all for attending. The point is education. Our presenter here tonight is a scientist. She's not a policy analyst or a policy maker or an elected official. So if you feel your blood pressure rising, please make sure that you pick up a pen or open an email and write a letter to your MLA or to the minister on these issues. Format is going to be similar to all of our other webinars. Nicole will present for 30 to 45 minutes, and we'll do Q&A for 15 to 30 minutes. You'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for those who are on Zoom, and you can put it in the comments for the people coming in from Facebook, and we will aggregate all of the questions and then ask them to Nicole after she's done presenting. So that's kind of the format. And now I will just quickly introduce Nicole. Nicole is originally from Edmonton, where they received a Bachelor of Science specializing in animal biology at the University of Alberta in 2014. Their undergrad worked on how anthropogenic disturbance influenced elk stress in elk in Jasper and Banff. After they worked for several years as a research technician, mostly on bird-related projects, before completing a Master of Science at the U of A, which was supervised by Dr. Andrew Durocher. Their thesis looked at how climate change was impacting polar bears and ringed seal diets in the southern Beaufort Sea using stable isotopes. After they completed their master's in 2018, they started their PhD at the University of Victoria under Dr. Jason Fisher and Dr. Brian Strozomsky. Their research focuses on how older moose calves are responding to landscape change from logging in the interior of BC, with a focus on the predation side of things. They currently live in Victoria, traveling to the interior to complete research around Prince George and Kamloops. So moose gets a lot of attention in the province. It's hits home for First Nations, for our members, resident hunters. Definitely a really important species. So Nicole, we appreciate you taking the time to share what you're finding with us, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you. See if this works again. Okay. Or is that working?
There you go. You're
Okay,
off to the races.
Okay. So thank you for the introduction. And you mentioned that I'm going to be talking about moose habitat selection, both from the mother's side of things as well as the calf, and how that relates to calf survival in the BC interior, particularly around Prince George and Kamloops. So first, I'm just going to start off with a bit of a background about the landscape change and moose populations in British Columbia. So starting in the late 1990s, interior British Columbia experienced the most severe and widespread outbreak of mountain pine beetle in its recorded history. So this massive outbreak followed several warmer winters, which allowed more beetles to survive and led to larger mountain pine beetle populations, which could overcome tree defenses. And so this led to a widespread outbreak where mountain pine beetle attacked around 50% of the total volume of commercial lodgepole pine in British Columbia. And the cumulative area of BC that was affected was estimated to be almost 20 million hectares, which to put into perspective is about 5 times the size of Vancouver Island. So the most severe period of this outbreak was around 2004 to 2005, with about 140 million cubic hectares killed that year alone. And while the amount of affected forest has declined since this peak, climate change is leading to mountain pine beetle expanding northward. So currently a lot of our landscape change driven by this event is in the interior, but it will be pushing further north as winter is warm. So following the mountain pine beetle outbreak, the BC government increased the annual allowable cut by 14.5 million cubic meters from the pre-outbreak levels. So this was to capture as much economic value from the standing dead timber available as possible. So in many areas, this more than doubled the annual allowable cut. So this is in areas such as Vanderhoof or Cornell, resulting in quite large cut block areas like the one shown in this photo. So these this increase in timber harvest pressure has since resulted in patchworks of large cut blocks with tree monocultures that are quite significantly managed, and these are interlinked by an extensive network of linear features, which is forestry roads, creating quite disturbed landscapes that are expected to have significant impacts on wildlife populations. So this is just showing how severe these landscape changes are. So this is the Bonaparte Plateau, just northwest of Kamloops. So Kamloops is kind of hard to see in this picture, but it's the bottom corner. So basically this change happened from 1986 to 2016. You can see that quite a bit of the plateau has been affected by cut blocks. And so the increases in annual allowable cut meant that timber previously allotted for logging in the coming decades has been harvested over just a few years instead. So this is a pretty drastic and rapid landscape change. So this coincided with increased timber harvest pressures across the BC interior, or coinciding with the increased timber harvest pressures across the BC interior. Licensed hunter harvest of moose declined gradually by about half, despite consistent hunter effort across the years. So you can see in this figure, the bars are showing how the estimated moose harvest, which is declining from 1987 to 2014, whereas the average number of days that hunters have gone out has stayed about the same. So the provincial moose numbers and harvest are pretty correlated. So this is suggesting that the declining harvest was a reaction to declining population trends and not changes in other factors like hunter effort. Moose surveys conducted by regional wildlife biologists during the winter of 2011-2012 and through to 2013-2014 suggested that population declines of 50 to 70% of moose had occurred in some areas of interior BC within the last decade. So from 1996 to 2005, moose populations only declined in 7 game management zones, so it's about 23% of the province. However, from 2006 to 2015, declines were found in 22 game management zones, so across 71% of the province. The best models including declining calf-cow ratios, declining juvenile survival, and declining cow survival. So overall, within this population study, the provincial moose population declined by 29% from 1996 to 2015, which is pretty drastic. And as you can see in this map, all of the red game management zones have a declining population during this time period, whereas the gray ones don't. They're either stable or increasing if they're gray. So the concurrent declines of moose with increased timber harvest indicated that a landscape change was likely a factor in moose population changes. So in response to moose population declines, the provincial moose monitoring project was initiated in December 2013. So the project monitored moose across 5 study areas in regions impacted by mountain pine beetle across the province. So you can see in this map, the 5 study areas are Bonaparte, Big Creek, Antiaco, Prince George South, and John Prince Research Forest. They're spread across a different severity of mountain pine beetle infestation. So the orange to brown colors. So the Provincial Moose Research Project was hypothesizing that landscape change increased the vulnerability of moose to predators and hunters across the landscape. So following timber harvest, cut blocks increase in vegetation biomass quite rapidly, peaking around a decade after logging. And this creates potential forage subsidies for moose, which can bolster their population similar to a wildfire. So the moose will tend to either increase in numbers after an event that creates more early cereal vegetation in the landscape, such as a fire or a cut block, either due to immigration or improved reproduction. However, while cut blocks are often assumed to act similar to a wildfire, there are some big differences that set them apart. So for one, the forage in cut blocks may not be high enough quality or quantity due to stand tending practices that reduce forage, such as brushing or spraying herbicides, or increased solar radiation that increases secondary compounds. Additionally, open habitats can increase energetic stress of moose by reducing snow interception, which makes it harder for moose to move through their environments. And the open habitats also decrease thermal cover, which moose need to protect themselves from heat stress, which they can get in both winter and summer. Further, the logging can also create landscapes that improve predator and hunter search efficiency, which results in landscapes that are much riskier for moose, either both directly through predation or perceived risk, which can lead to anti-predator responses that also decrease their, which also cause energetic stress. So there's growing evidence that anthropogenic modifications to the landscape influence the search efficiency of predators and thus predation encounter rate, often by facilitating predator movement or increasing prey visibility. And this can be a problem, especially in the case for large-scale resource extraction, such as logging with large cut blocks that are linked by linear features, such as forestry roads. So cut blocks reduce hiding cover for moose, which can lead them to be more easily spotted by hunters and predators. And so based off of some work that we did previously with collared wolves around Prince George, the wolf kill sites of moose are more likely to be found in new and regenerating cut blocks, suggesting that these are riskier habitat for moose. So as you can see, as the proportion of new cut block in the landscape increases, there's a higher chance that you'll come across a moose kill site. And while the mortality site isn't necessarily linked to where the encounter of the prey would be, it does indicate that potentially these habitats are more risky. And so as you can see, the same pattern occurs for regenerating cut blocks, having an increased chance of having a moose kill site within them. As well, data from the collared wolves suggested that wolves were selecting for younger cut blocks, which is possibly due to improved hunting efficiency. And they also moved faster in the younger cut blocks and selected for habitat that was closer to linear features. So this is consistent with previous research on wolf habitat selection. However, we also did find that linear features weren't an important predictor of moose kill sites, which indicates that linear features are mostly used as a travel corridor. So the combination of these two landscape features can mean that an area with both logging features connected by roads is pretty risky for moose. And so this is supported by lots of other work on wolves, such as some work by Melanie Dickey and looking at how wolves and bears move through the landscape. And their work found that the rate of movement for predators did increase quite a bit on linear features as compared to undisturbed habitat. So this would is all adding up together, suggesting that the predators are using linear features to search moose habitat patches much quicker and further than in undisturbed landscapes. As well, predators do often select for linear features, whereas prey avoid them, indicating that predators use them for movement and hunting, whereas prey find them riskier. And this can contribute to declines in prey populations, where linear features are making prey more vulnerable to predation. So the Provincial Moose Research Project expected that landscape change was increasing the vulnerability of moose by improving hunter and predator search efficiency, by decreasing hiding cover for moose and concentrating them in remaining patches, by also increasing energetic requirements due to reducing snow interception by trees and reducing thermal cover, which would reduce body condition of moose entering winter. And they expected that if their landscape change hypothesis was correct, that moose population growth rates would be predicted to increase as cut blocks regenerated and roads were rendered impassable and moose were more evenly dispersed throughout the environment instead of being clustered in remaining patches. As well, the Provincial Moose Research Project expected that cow moose survival would have a greater effect on population growth rates than calf survival did, because the declines occurred over such a short time period. However, when they did look at cow survival, the rates indicated about stable. The survival rates were pretty stable and high, which indicated that maybe calves were influencing population changes more so than the cows. So you can see in this figure for each of the study areas, Big Creek, Bonaparte, Antiaco, Johns Prince Research Forest, and Prince George South, that generally cow survival across the years stays around or above 85%, which is required for a stable population. And while there are some years that do dip below this kind of 85% threshold, generally they're above or the error bars overlap. So based on these results, the research project began collaring calves in two study areas. So in Prince George South, which is southwest of Prince George, as the name kind of implies, and on the Bonaparte Plateau, which is northwest of Kamloops. So in total, almost 200 calves were collared and monitored for body condition, habitat selection, movement, and survival in both of these study areas. And of these calves, most mortalities that occurred before 1 year of age were attributed to predation, whereas health-related mortalities, which included apparent starvation, winter tick, and other parasites or diseases, made up the other portion. Because habitat selection impacts the exposure that an animal has to resources and risks. This led me to ask the question, how does mother and calf moose habitat selection influence the survival of calves? Because a large percent of the calves were dying from predation, I expected that either calves or their mothers were making poor choices that exposed the calves to risky situations and led them to being predated on by a wolf or cougar or bear. Whereas the because I was looking at older calves who are more independent, I decided to look at the habitat selection of both the mothers and calves. So offspring survival is shaped by maternal habitat use at a young age, and when older, the calves' own habitat selection choices play a more significant role. Habitat selection impacts the resources and risks that animals experience, which consequently impacts the fitness of both animals. And while females should select habitat that increases offspring fitness, these decisions can contradict what is best for the mother, and so mothers are expected to select for habitat that maximizes their net fitness, even if this comes at a cost to their offspring. And females must find the optimal maternal investment by balancing energy expenditure into current offspring with their own survival and future reproduction. And so when the calf is older and more independent, their calves' habitat selection plays a more significant role in their own survival as well. So while calves are expected to make ideal habitat selection choices to improve their fitness, this isn't always the case. So calves are often inexperienced, and they may make poor decisions, poor habitat selection decisions that could lead to their own mortality. And so landscape change can make environmental cues more difficult for animals to interpret, leading to poor habitat selection decisions. And this can be more of a problem in inexperienced animals such as calves. And resource extraction alters the distribution of resources and risks through the landscape, which are both main drivers of habitat selection. And individuals make habitat selection trade-offs between safety and resource use based on their biological requirements, which impacts both reproductive investment into offspring by mothers, as well as both mother and offspring survival. So if the animal makes the decision to prioritize forage when they're selecting habitat, this can lead to improved body condition, which allows for increased maternal investment into offspring, larger and faster growing and healthier offspring with increased chances of survival for both the mother and the offspring. And then the effects of malnutrition are both immediate and long lasting, such that nutrition has lifelong impacts on the fitness of offspring. And this means that malnutrition, both prior to the calf being born and after parturition, can impact calf recruitment. And on the other hand, resource-rich habitat often co-occurs with elevated predation risk. So predators are expected to select for increased prey density, which should occur in higher quality habitats. And prey that select for these resource-rich but risky habitats have a higher probability of encounters with predators that could lead to mortality, especially for juveniles. Additionally, increased predation risk may suppress prey reproduction due to anti-predator behaviors, leading to poor quality offspring with smaller bodies, decreased body condition, and increased probability of offspring mortality. So often an animal's decision to avoid risk or prioritize forage depends on its internal state. So risk-sensitive foraging theory predicts that animals with a higher risk of starvation will take more risks, while animals in better condition will be more risk adverse. And so this figure is showing how the rate of energy intake required to avoid starvation changes depending on an animal's energy budget under varying food variances. So animals in good condition, so for example, the top graph is showing an animal that's in good condition. They require a lower rate of energy intake to survive, whereas those in poor condition require a higher rate of energy intake to survive and have a higher chance of survival when they do take a riskier diet. So basically the habitat selection of animals in poor conditions should reflect risk-prone behavior, whereas animals in good condition should avoid risk. And as juveniles are highly vulnerable to limiting factors, these habitat selection choices likely will impact survival significantly. And this is particularly pertinent in regions with drastic landscape change, such as interior British Columbia. So we compared the habitat selection of successful and unsuccessful mothers and surviving and non-surviving calves to determine how habitat selection in a disturbed landscape impacts calf survival. So we hypothesized that successful mothers and surviving calves would use less risky habitats with more hiding cover, such as forests, that would promote calf survival. And we also expected that successful mothers and surviving calves would be in better condition. And as poor body condition does lead to animals making riskier decisions, which could lead to predation events of the calf. So to answer our questions on how habitat selection differed between surviving and non-surviving calves, as well as successful and unsuccessful mothers, we used two different types of habitat selection analyses. So I won't go too much into the details for these analyses, but for the mothers, we used seasonal third-order resource selection functions, which compared use to available locations within the animal's home range. And the mother's habitat selection was assessed for seasons both pre and post-parturition, as maternal effects can be quite long-lived. And for calves, we use integrated step selection analyses, which are similar to resource selection functions, but integrate movement into the analysis. And these allow you to simultaneously examine both habitat selection and movement while constraining your available steps to a more realistic sample of where the animal can actually move. We were able to do this with the calf data because it had a finer resolution than the adult female collar data. For these analyses, we defined surviving calves as living from capture to 1 year old and used the same designation for successful mothers. Whereas for non-surviving calves or unsuccessful mothers, the calf died between capture, which was in January to March of the year, to 1 year old, which is around mid-May. So we looked at 187 calves for the calf analysis and 103 mother calf pairs for the maternal resource selection analysis. And within the models, for the habitat selection models, we focused on primarily just disturbance features, including new and regenerating cut blocks, linear features, and burns, as well as other landscape features that may be important forage or hiding cover habitats, such as forests, water bodies, and topography. So I'll start off with the results from the maternal analysis. So converse to our hypothesis, we found that successful mothers appeared to adopt a more risk-prone habitat selection strategy, whereas unsuccessful mothers appeared more risk-adverse. So successful mothers selected for early cereal habitats, such as young cut blocks and burns, which would provide more forage. They also exhibited reduced selection for forests as offspring vulnerability decreased. And then unsuccessful mothers, on the other hand, selected for habitats with lower foraging potential, but more cover, such as forests. And we also observed consistent selection patterns for certain features within regions, indicating that all mothers did perceive certain spatial features as good or bad habitat. So for example, both successful and unsuccessful mothers showed avoidance of habitat close to linear features and with high linear feature densities, and they also all seem to select for edge habitats, which would provide hiding cover. For the calf analysis, we found that the habitat selection and movement of calves in disturbed landscapes varies between regions that you look at, as well as recruitment statuses. So the recruited calves did appear to avoid riskier habitat and move faster when they were in risky areas. So for example, surviving calves selected for habitat with more hiding cover, such as regenerating cut blocks, water bodies, and forest cover. And they also moved faster near linear features and open habitats, while non-recruited calves appeared to avoid some risky habitat. They also appeared to avoid safer habitat and linger in unsafe habitat, possibly due to foraging, which could have increased their predation risk. For example, they moved slower in new cut blocks and avoided escape habitats like water bodies or high elevation habitats. And for these results, I've highly simplified them because the analyses were quite complex. So if anyone is interested in kind of a more detailed breakdown, feel free to email me. It's just my first and last name at uvic.ca. And I'm happy to go into more detail. It would just be a little too confusing for a presentation. But our next step was asking, how does mother and calf condition impact recruitment success? So we expected that variation in habitat selection between successful and unsuccessful females would reflect maternal quality, with unsuccessful females being in poor condition with lower body fat and a higher tick load, and having lower success with their previous calf. And for the mothers, we looked at both current and legged measures for body fat and winter tick load. So we did limit the analyses with the mothers that had been captured twice in consecutive years to allow for the legged measures. And then we also compared calf body weight and winter tick load between surviving and non-surviving calves. So we expected non-surviving calves would have a lower body weight and higher winter tick load, putting them at a worse condition and more vulnerable to limiting factors. So winter ticks attach onto moose through the winter, and they gust in the fall and stay attached through the winter before dropping off in the spring. And while attached, winter ticks on heavily infested moose will take huge volumes of blood, and this blood loss requires significant energy to replace and can have quite a significant impact on moose health, leading to things like hair loss and even mortality due to the energetic stress induced by the infestation. So when looking at mother success, we found that female moose success did decrease as their tick load in the current year increased. So basically, the cows with higher infestation likely had less energy that they would be able to invest into their calf, leading to a higher chance of calf mortality. However, we found that the legged winter tick load, so the winter tick load in the year before the calf was captured, was not significantly related to the mother's recruitment success. So these results were surprising, made it surprising that unsuccessful moose were adopting a risk-adverse habitat selection strategy, which we would have expected, so this possibly contributed to reduced energy allocation to offspring. Additionally, offspring of unsuccessful females could be exposed to habitats with higher winter tick densities, leading to increased calf infestation. For calves, we found that as winter tick load increased as well, the probability of recruitment decreased. So this matches the results from the maternal analysis, which found that unsuccessful females had higher winter tick loads. So likely the non-surviving calves get a double whammy of having higher winter tick loads that reduce their energy, potentially also having mothers that are contributing less energy allocating into their offspring, leading to reduced calf survival. So these results were expected because winter ticks do have a quite drastic impact upon moose calves, and some calves do have quite significant winter tick loads, which would be expected to lead to their mortality. Next, we looked at the relationship between body fat and mother success. So we measured the maximum runt fat using portable ultrasounds as a measure of mother body condition. So this was done during the period that the mother was captured. And we looked at both the current body condition as well as the previous year's body condition. So surprisingly, we found that the probability of mother success in recruiting a calf actually declined with increasing body fat in the previous year. However, the mother success was not significantly related to current body fat. So this was unexpected because we would assume that a mother that was in better condition or who had more body fat would be able to allocate more energy into her offspring, as well as make less risky decisions that would contribute to potentially higher recruitment success of the calf. So while we expected the successful mothers would have a better body condition, this doesn't appear to necessarily be the case. So our next step was comparing previous calf survival between successful and unsuccessful mothers. So this step was completed using data from midwinter aerial surveys, which we completed the year prior as an estimate of whether females were accompanied by a previous calf in the year prior to calf capture. So this is looking at repeated mother success. And so we found that mothers with a calf present midwinter had a higher probability of being successful the following year. So successful mothers may just be better at keeping their calves alive. And this may also explain the decrease in probability of success for mothers as their body fat in the previous year increased. So successful mothers would have been accompanied by a previous calf, which would have led to reduced body condition due to diverted energy resources, whereas unsuccessful mothers were not burdened by a calf, so they would have been able to invest all that energy back into themselves, and which would have led to a better body condition. So this analysis also indicates that successful cows are potentially more consistently successful. So something that they're doing is seeming to be working better. Although we do need to follow the females for more than just 2 calves to get a better look at whether this is actually the case or not. So the last thing that we looked at was we compared calf body weight between surviving and non-surviving calves. So a subset of calves were weighed by helicopter. However, sometimes it's pretty difficult to actually weigh the calves. So for example, if they're in a forest habitat, you can't actually get in there to weigh them with a helicopter. So we used an estimated body weight for this analysis, which was predicted using morphological measurements, including total body length, chest circumference, and neck circumference. And this is commonly done for ungulates since they are hard to weigh in the field. And so I compared the estimated body weight between surviving and non-surviving calves. However, I did not find strong support that predicted body weight was related to calf recruitment, with the null model being most supported. And so this is potentially due to using the estimated body weight, but it could also just be that body weight of calves is a poor proxy for their health. So overall, risky habitat selection with forage prioritization appears to pay off for mothers in recruiting older moose calves. Successful mothers exhibited risk-prone behavior with selection for polygonal disturbances that increase forage, likely bolstering energy allocation to offspring. And this likely helped successful moose offset body conditions exhibited in the prior winter caused by energy invested into a previous calf. Unsuccessful females selected habitat with more hiding cover, but potentially poorer forage, which possibly led to less energy allocation to their offspring, especially when considering their higher winter tick infestations, which may have also been present, which were likely also present on the calves. So conversely, for calves, risk avoidance appears to pay off more when examining their habitat selection directly. So calves that survived seem to prioritize use of habitat with more hiding cover and moved faster when in risky habitat. And calves that didn't survive avoided potential escape habitat and seemed to linger in unsafe habitat, where they may have been exposed to predators. So this difference in risk avoidance by mothers and calves could be attributed to the temporal scale of both analyses. So for the mother analysis, I was looking at seasonal habitat selection from before the calf was born all the way up to when the calf was 1 year old. So they could have been making riskier decisions earlier on that allowed them to supplement their diet with forage that they needed to keep their calf alive. Whereas later on, when their calf was present, the calf avoiding risky habitat for the calf avoiding risky habitat would pay off more. It also is important to consider that each animal is making decisions that maximizes its fitness more so than necessarily what its offspring are doing. So the mothers are always attempting to maximize their net fitness, which means that they could be trying to recruit their current calf, but they could also be prioritizing on staying alive and reproducing in the future if they think that their current situation is just not conducive to recruiting a calf, such as if they're in poor body condition. Whereas a calf, for a calf, avoiding risk is quite important because they are so vulnerable to predation. So overall, these results do highlight the importance of spatial complementation of high quality foraging habitat and hiding cover for older calf recruitment. So to support moose calf survival, polygonal disturbances such as burns and cutlock should be managed such that forage potential is maximized while predation risk is minimized. In areas that are logged, managers should ensure that sufficient forage and hiding cover is retained with any developed linear features deactivated following harvest to reduce predation risk to calves. And building of linear features into previously inaccessible areas or areas with a high forage potential should be minimized. And linear features that link cut blocks should be deactivated in a way to impede predator movement and reduce predation risk across the landscape. And cut blocks should also be designed to maximize edge habitat, which augments forage while also minimizing predation risk with interspersion of mature forest, which provides security cover. And then as well, if caplux are replanted, there should be deciduous vegetation included with stand tending practices that minimize forage, such as brushing minimized to promote forage, which is important for calf survival as well as future reproduction of cows. So I'm just going back to this graph to wrap up. So as a reminder, most moose calves in the study area did die from predation. However, while we do have lots of data on what the moose are doing in our study areas, there's a more limited understanding of what the predators are doing in these landscapes. And so a lot of the evidence that of how predators do use landscapes has come from other regions. And there's quite a bit of evidence that predators and other animals do vary in how they respond to disturbances between landscapes. So the next steps for this project are to look at how the predator distributions are being affected in the landscapes by logging and other anthropogenic disturbance features. So to do this, we have camera traps that we've deployed in Prince George last year, and currently have cameras out in around the Bonaparte Plateau, looking at the predators that are in the area. So things like wolves, black bears, grizzly bears, and cougars we're focusing on, and using the data from the camera traps to better understand the spatial distributions of these animals. As well, this data will be used to look at survival analyses of the calves to see if the way that they are using the landscape is non-ideal, which is contributing to their reduced survival. So hopefully this work will be completed within the next year or so. And so keep an eye out for it. And then the habitat selection work that I did present is currently going through the review process. So keep an eye out for that as well. So just acknowledge everyone that has helped with this project or supported this project. There's been a lot of people that have contributed to this work, and it's a lot of work that has gone into it by the Ministry of Forest staff and volunteers in capturing and managing the huge data set that we've now accumulated, as well as all of our funders I would like to thank, as well as my labs at the University of Victoria, through Dr. Jason Fisher's lab and Dr. Brian Starzomski's lab. And then just want to thank everyone here for joining in and having me through this presentation. And I guess that's it's all
Great.
I have.
Awesome. There's a lot to unpack there. Thanks, Nicole. Maybe we'll get into a couple of questions that we have here, and I think I'll deal with a few of the themes to start out, and one which is probably not going to be a surprise to you. But are you able to talk about the bearing of monoculture replanting? And I don't know if did you do any work related to glyphosate and spraying in your work, or have you done any comparison between areas? So I guess the first one is, have you looked at the monoculture issue, and have you looked at spraying? I guess would be the questions that are going to come up multiple times.
So far I haven't looked at the monoculture or herbicide too much. My focus has been more on predation. Also the way that the habitat selection analyses worked, they weren't as conducive to looking at that. I'm kind of hoping that I can incorporate it more into the survival analyses, because I will be able to look at more of a home range side of things, which will allow me to better incorporate those measures into the model. But yeah, currently with the habitat selection analyses, I haven't looked too much into that.
Okay, awesome, thanks. And you touched on the problem, but one of the questions is related to linear features. Does the removal, is there anything in the lit or off the top of your head around the removal of linear features having a positive impact on moose populations and calf survival?
Yeah, there's I mean, the moose, a lot of the work on linear features has been related more to caribou, but with moose there's evidence that they, when the linear features are restored, they aren't impeded by the restoration work as much as predators are. So they would do better in area where there's restored linear features. I'm not sure if I've read any specific papers that I can think of coming off the top of my head where it's had like a population level impact. But definitely in terms of movement and predation.
Okay, cool. So there's disproportionate benefits to restoration. Okay. Here's a kind of a theoretical question. If you were to create the perfect moose habitat, what would it look like?
I think it would be a habitat that isn't uniform, because they need a mix of a lot of different things to survive. Like they need to have the wetlands so they can get proper minerals and nutrients. They need to have the mature forest to have hiding cover and to provide good calving habitat. They need edge habitat. They just need they need a mosaic of landscape features, not just kind of a uniform landscape. And also it does depend on the region, because it did seem that with my analyses that it is very regional on what landscape features do seem to work better for calf survival, at least from my focus. They did differ quite a bit between landscapes. So I think that the perfect landscape really depends on where you're looking and what the biogeoclimatic zone is and stuff like that.
Okay, thanks. This one is going to be, this is far more specific related to logging, and this may not be something that you're even able to look at. The question is, does scarification increase calf mortality?
I'm not sure.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yep, makes sense. No, that makes sense. That'd be a hard one to answer. Was there any, okay, so somebody's asking correlation observed between winter tick load, preferences for resource, and risk avoidance. I mean, that gets pretty complicated, but did you layer all that up and look at interactions at all? I'm
kind of hoping that I can do a better job of assessing that with the survival analyses, because I'll actually be able to incorporate all the variables within the same model. Currently, the way that the analyses are set up, there is like an implied relationship between those between risky habitat selection and higher winter tick loads, but I haven't explicitly made that connection yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so this question, so it says cup walks provide more browse and therefore food, yet had increased probability of predation. Calves move better, moving more quickly through risky areas, but still accessing forage. So I mean, that really ties back to your last answer around mosaics and kind of diverse landscapes. Does the pie chart, that was around survival, was that only for calves? Mort stuff?
Yeah, that one was calf focused.
Okay, and how does that compare to cow morts?
The cow mortalities are a little bit more diverse because there's like hunting and the calves. The pie chart for the calves is focused on before their first birthday, so it is very like predator heavy, but there is still quite a bit of predation for the cows.
Awesome. Are you doing any work in the Big Creek area? So that would be west of Williams Lake.
My study area spans kind of from Kamloops to 100 Mile House and Cache Creek area, kind of all in that area. Yeah, there's Big Creek is included in there.
Yeah, there are callers out there. Okay, so you had ultrasounds out. What was fecundity? What were kind of pregnancy rates look like?
The moose are pretty much they're really high. Most moose are pregnant every year. Whether they actually, yeah.
That's good. You link calf recruitment to cows being previously successful with rearing calves the year before. Was this compared to the age of the cows at all? So I guess, yeah.
No, I didn't compare it to the age of the cows. I suspect that it would have an influence, but we had a limited sample of cows that had been paired with a calf that had also been captured the year prior. So I wasn't able to go into that depth with the analysis because of the limited sample size.
Awesome. Another question, any evidence of coyote predation on cows or calves?
Right. For our work, it focuses on the 8-month-old calves. So the predation has all been wolves, cougars, and bears. I'm not sure about neonates. There's a potential, but I don't have evidence of it.
Awesome. Okay, what was the next question? Okay, when you do post-mortem investigations on moose, are you doing any sampling for glyphosate in your morts?
I don't think that they do. I think that we mostly are looking at parasites, body fat, like from looking at marrow fat, evidence of predation or the predator that was involved, and taking like samples of long bones and stuff. I don't think that we really look at herbicides.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so this is back around edge habitat. It talks about how much salvage is really going on. And I guess, in those areas, is there enough hiding cover left? And what do we need to do to ensure there's sufficient forage on the landscape as these things age? I mean, so really it comes down to, what are your recommendations to try to restore or minimize the decline in these areas as it relates to how the landscape is being managed?
I think that the way that we are going in and logging everything that has like the salvage logging, I don't think is always necessary. I think that it is important to leave some of these stands of in mountain pine beetle infested trees to leave the diversity in the landscape, because currently right now the cupulox that are in the landscape are quite massive. At least the ones that I've flown over. I think that just the way that we look at disturbances needs to change. That they're not something that we need to go in and clear out all of kind of the deadwood and understanding that we do need to recover some of that timber so that the economic value is retained, but also flooding the market with mountain pine beetle infested timber does have consequences as well. I think that we need to prioritize treating the landscape as a natural place that does have the variability and not managing it by removing deciduous or planting tree monocultures is important, because it is the diversity that has led to the diversity that we do have in our landscapes right now, and it is important to maintain that.
Thanks. Okay, so this is around how I guess you're cleaning your data. The question is, are there extreme outliers incorporated into your data, or are they discarded? So I don't know how much of a rabbit hole you want to go down and how you manage some of your collared animals, but maybe a bit of insight if you have some.
I guess I don't know if they had like a specific analysis in mind. I try and retain everything that is within like a realistic bound, and trying to think if there's any severe outliers that I have removed, but I guess I just say I do the normal data exploration and modeling process, and yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so, and this is, I think the cameras might help get you there, but we'll ask the question, is there a direct correlation between predation rate and predator populations? I.e., would a decline or a decrease in predator populations actually result in a functional response in moose populations? Looks like Nicole's Zoom might have crashed, unless it's my Zoom.
like unfortunately Nicole's Zoom has crashed. Yes.
Okay. Well, it's just after 8, so we'll just give it a minute or two, and if she gets back on, we'll continue on with questions, and if not, we'll have to call it a night. Here we go. She's back. There we go.
Hi.
Did the power go out there?
Yeah, my power just died. We've been in a windstorm all day, and I guess the power just went out.
Okay.
Yeah, this is as good as I got.
Oh,
I'm
that's awesome.
sorry.
No, that's awesome. Oh, we got you back. Okay.
Yeah,
There we go.
at
Okay.
least it made it through the presentation.
Yeah, I'll just check your speed. So the last question, I don't know if you caught that one, but it was around essentially, is there a correlation between the predator abundance and the predation rate, and would declines or a decrease in predator populations actually result in a functional response in moose populations?
I think that I'll have a better idea when I have the camera trap stuff done, but right now I don't think we have a good idea of the predator populations in the area, so it's hard to actually make the connection. Perhaps I will be more so able to look at the distributions of the predators and not quite have the population of the predators quite as figured out, just because of limitations on the data. I think that a decrease in the predator populations would likely contribute to an increased population of moose, but the predator, if the predators are still able to hunt quite efficiently through the landscape, I still think that they will be able to keep moose populations down. And I also think that removal of predators or decreases in the predator populations in the landscape would have impacts on other species within the areas, potentially due to apparent competition, stuff like that. So yeah, it's complex.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Well, maybe what we'll do, just because I mean, you're operating in the dark, so I think we'll call it a night. That was quick. So you're obviously working off your cell phone or something, because your internet would have gone down. So that was
hotspotting in.
yeah. So that was really appreciate you coming back on that quick. So thank you, Nicole, for your time. That was awesome. Maybe once you get done and all defended, we'll have you back for the next couple of chapters and the final analysis. So thanks for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to share the camera trap work whenever it's done. So I've been working on tagging through all the images right now, so it'll be really neat to have a better idea.
Awesome. That's great. And thanks for everyone for tuning in tonight. We really appreciate it. I guess the message tonight is diversity in our forests and having a mosaic and leaving some timber on the landscape, and some deciduous stuff is going to help moose. The next webinar is March 22nd, I believe, with Siobhan Darlington from UBCO on the interior cougar project. So thanks everyone, and thanks Nicole for the quick coming back on so fast. That's awesome. I hope you guys get your power back soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone. Have a good night.